3, 2, 1, and we are live with the European report. My name is Tomas Sandell. I'm the founding director of the European Coalition for Israel. And today in the studio, we have two hardworking members of the European Parliament. When most of Europe is away on summer holiday, they're still working hard in the halls in Brussels and Strasbourg. We have the Vice President of the European Parliament, Nicola, very much welcome to the program, and the Chair of the European Parliament Delegation to the Israeli Knesset, Bert-Jaan Ruissen. Welcome. If I may start with you, Ms. Vice President, you are, apart from being one of the most important decision makers in the European Parliament, in your capacity as Vice President, you are also Chair of the Working Committee Against Anti-Semitism. So let us start from the beginning. What can the European Parliament do to combat anti-Semitism?
Thank you first for the discussion and for inviting me. I think we have a lot possibilities to do. And this is also why the working group against anti-Semitism is working across all the groups, parliamentary groups in the parliament to prepare, but also to make aware where we have to fight against anti-Semitism as European Union, as Parliament, but also in the cooperation with all the EU institutions, other intergroups, national parliaments, and NGOs, because it's really important that we inform of the realities on the ground, that we have a vivid debate with Jewish communities, but also with other communities in all the societies of our member state. And this is how we want to prevent anti-Semitic behavior and also find new approaches and solutions in our activities and for the member states. So for us, for example, education is key. So to really see how we can, by prevention in the educational system, really have the possibility to make aware, to have this sensitiveness. Where does anti-Semitic speech begins? In the schoolyard, in the lessons. So to look over the curricula, to have really this. So there is also the IRA definition for us, very important definition, to have a common ground, how to detect anti-Semitism. On that, really to work not only with students, but also with teachers, to go further to the civil servants, to be in touch and discussion with the judges when it comes to prosecution, when we see anti-Semitic behavior in our member states, and also for all the measures governments in the member states have to take. I mean, we saw that the IRA definition was adopted, not only by Parliament, but on the EU level. But now we have really to enforce it in the member states so that we have a common ground on that. Common ground also when we have European files, for example, as co-legislator, as we have it now for the digital package. So it's for me clear that when we did, for example, discuss with the Digital Markets Act on online hate speech, that we have the responsibility here to come further, also to combat anti-Semitism, to see the responsibility of huge social platforms, and to have this also as a key in the legislation we have upon us. For this, it's important, and we are working on that with the European Agency for Fundamental Rights to have the right data. There is always a gap in the data collection, and we just want to enforce, to give also the agency the means that they can help us in getting this data so that we can use it also for the combat of anti-Semitism. And clearly, we also work quite close with the Commission. The Commission has a special envoy with Katharina von Schnurbein, but also the Commissioner, Mr. Skinas, is very active on that, not only with the forthcoming strategy on combating anti-Semitism and fostering Jewish life. We will see in this autumn. We have discussion with him on that topic, and so you see we are quite active also as parliamentarian.
Thank you. That was a lot of information to take in. And if I understand our conversation before we started the recording, that you also have a meeting with the commissioner coming up today. So this is only to prove that you are very active indeed. Mr. Ruissen, you are the chair of the European Parliament delegation to the Israeli Knesset, and sometimes you may ask yourself the question, well, how does this relate to anti-Semitism? But as we have pointed out so many times, there is what the late Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sachs said, that anti-Semitism today mutates, and one particular form of anti-Semitism today is attacking the Jewish state, or even attacking the Jewish people because of the state of Israel. What can the European Parliament do about this problem?
Speaking about the delegation for the contact with Israel, first of all, I would like maybe small correction. I'm the vice chair of the delegation instead of the chair. But I can say that our Israel delegation is very, very active. I think it's one of the most active delegations in the parliament. Our contacts as members of Parliament, members of the European Parliament, with the Knesset members, with the ambassador, with different organizations in Israel, are very, very intensive. As delegation, we meet, I think, every month, and we discuss different issues about the situation in Israel and about strengthening our relations with Israel. So by doing this, by working so closely together with Israeli authorities, we clearly show, as members of the European Parliament, that there is not any reason to attack the Jewish state. And there is not any reason to demonize the Israeli state. What we show is that Israel is a democratic state. We share the same values. Israel has the right to defend itself. But yes, indeed, the recent developments are very worrying. Unfortunately, we have to conclude that anti-Semitism is increasing inside Europe and also outside Europe. And I think we have seen an increased anti-Semitism due to the recent conflict between Hamas and Israel.
Yes, thank you, and sorry if I made you the chair of the delegation. I think I said vice chair, but
sorry. Sorry about that.
Either way, you would be qualified. Let's make that point clear. Coming back to you, Ms. Vice President, as you are very much aware, the European Commission is working currently on a roadmap for a comprehensive working program in the fight against anti-Semitism. And we have been asked to, in this consultation round, to give our feedback. And one thing which we have brought up in the discussion is the need for the European Union to have a coherent policy when it comes to fighting anti-Semitism, meaning that there should be a zero tolerance for anti-Semitism when it becomes to EU's external relations or any EU-funded project for that matter. This brings us, of course, back to the subject which we dealt with in this program last week, and that is the very problematic content of Palestinian school textbooks. On a positive note, there has been not sure what to call it, but an awakening, if you wish, both on a Commission level and the European Parliament level, where there have been some very harsh criticism in recent months to say that this is something which is unacceptable and which needs to stop. Am I interpreting the situation correctly, Ms. Vice President, that we expect a new take on this now from the European institutions?
Yes, I think for us, for European Parliament, but also for the Commission and the EU in a whole, it's clear that we really have there isn't any way to use European funds for financing anti-Semitism, not directly and not indirectly. I mean, indirectly sometimes it's difficult, but we have to deal with that. And I cannot accept that, for example, in the case of the school books you're mentioning, it's always, okay, European Union is not financing school books, but European Union is only financing teachers. But if those teachers are using anti-Semitic school books, then I have an indirect way of finance to finance, and so we have to change this. I made now the proposition not only to go to, okay, we cut then the funds for the teachers, because this means that maybe somebody else who we do not want, who will radicalize again much more, will step in. But I would go from the other side around. I would care about school books. So I proposed to have a pact of education for that, so that we make sure that those teachers are financed, and that it is financed that there are good school materials, the school books, the web pages, the platforms for learning. And this, I think, could be a good way to bring on Palestinian Authority, bring on parents, bring on teachers in a common pact with European Union, and with the financing of a good educational system, because we know that education is key also for relations, for understanding of the other side, and we really have to prevent that this hate we see in this relation is given from generation to next generation, especially via school system. But we need to have a quality school system so that this radicalization cannot be taken to the children in other places by other persons we cannot control or cannot help to go another way. And so I think to work on such a pact of education would be a good idea, and we will discuss it in some minutes also with the Commissioner.
Wonderful. This is, of course, music to our ears, and we do hope and believe that progress can be made, and there can be, as you mentioned, a real reform. Coming back to you, Bert-Jaan Ruissen, let us be clear that we really want to commend the European Commission in its excellent work that Katharina von Schnurbein has done in recent years in leading this global fight against anti-Semitism. At the same time, we know that EU-Israeli relations, which of course is a different matter, has not always been without problems. Today, Israel has a new government, and I understand that the foreign minister, Mr. Lapid, visited Brussels just on Monday. Perhaps you would want to comment on that. Is this the time to reboot EU-Israeli relations? And do you see any changes as a consequence of a new government in Jerusalem?
Well, I think the fact that Mr. Lapid visited Brussels this week, that was a very, very good, positive step. I think it's the first time since, what I heard, since 12 years that an Israeli foreign minister has addressed the EU foreign ministers. So it's quite historical. And Lapid said that he wants to change and improve dialogue between Israel and Europe after years of political tension. So it's also, I think, a good sign that that he visited Brussels. I think it's only the fourth foreign visit of every foreign minister since he took office. That's a positive signal. It's, I think, a sign of goodwill from the Israeli side. And what we need now is also goodwill from the EU side. Over the past years, we have seen, in my opinion, in Europe moving in the wrong direction. Also when it comes to the Israeli legitimate security concerns, for example, and the existence of hate speech in the region where Nicola just said about. So I have the idea the EU has to change his mindset, and maybe we can use his moment indeed of the situation. There's a new government in Israel. Maybe we can use that opportunity for changing also our mindset set in the EU. And I think it's time for action now. Also from the side from the Commission, speaking about violence in the region. We sent in the past already different letters to the Commission about the issue of the textbooks and so on, but nothing changed. And I think now it's time for the Commission to act and to make clear that they take these concerns concerning violence in the regions, anti-Semitism seriously. So hopefully what also is a proposal of Nicola. Hopefully it will find a good, let's say, it was supported by the Commission, hopefully, and maybe that's a good way to go forward in this specific issue.
Thank you, Bert-Jaan, and obviously the next months will tell in what direction we are moving. Let me come back to you, Ms. Vice President, again, and speak about a different aspect on this issue, a very powerful tool which has helped, I believe, the discussion on anti-Semitism. I'm talking about the IRA working definition on anti-Semitism, and where the European Parliament, to my recollection, was one of the first international institutions to adopt the resolution. And there, of course, you have played a very central role, as have your predecessor, Ms. Edstadler from Austria, with whom we also worked closely together. But would you want to comment on the IRA working definition? There has also been pushback, and the critiques, of course, are saying that this is limiting freedom of speech, but others find it as a very useful tool because in order to speak about anti-Semitism, we need to be able to define it. How are you looking at the IRA definition?
Yes, thank you. This is really an important question. But to be very outspoken, for me, anti-Semitism can never be freedom of speech. So this is impossible. And the IRA working definition helps us to detect really on a common ground anti-Semitism. Of course, you can be critical against the state of Israel. I totally agree with Mr. Ruissen that this is a democratic state. Of course, there are governments where someone are nearby, for example, my personal ideas than others, but these governments can be elected. You can elect new governments. So this is a democratic state in a quite critical environment. And so it's clear you can criticize on decisions of a government, of a state, what else, but this cannot be a pretext for being anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist. And so we need this IRA working definition really to detect those camouflage projects, as for example, the BDS movement is for me clearly anti-Semitic. For example, with the Al-Quds marches. And so for me, this is also something where then governments, administration, judges, teachers can work with. And I would really fight for this enforcement of the definition in all our member states on all administrative levels, and we should not go with other attempts to replace it by, for example, with the Jerusalem Declaration.
Thank you. That was very clear message, and also a thank you to the federal government in Germany, which I believe has really been at the forefront. And as you all know, we are working very closely with Felix Klein as well on this issue. This brings us to the last 10 or even less minutes of the program, so we are moving very quickly. But there's one more important topic that I would like to raise up during this conversation. I'll start with you, Bert-Jaan, but I'll let Vice President comment on it as well before we close. And that is the UN Conference Against Racism, what we today call the Durban Conference, that took place some 20 years ago. We have another review conference planned for September. And I don't have to explain here what happened in Durban 20 years ago. I think for many this is already water under the bridge, but sadly very dark waters, if you wish. The Netherlands announced just a few days ago that they are pulling out of the conference together with Canada, Australia, I think Austria. There are a number, UK, not to forget UK, there are a number of countries which are pulling out in a way to make it clear that there needs to be a red line as to what is accepted and what is not. To you as the vice chair of the Israeli delegation, the European Parliament delegation to the Israeli Knesset, what could the European Parliament do to call upon the member states to, in solidarity with the Jewish people, to pull out of this conference, Bert-Jaan Ruissen?
Well, first of all, I would like to say that I fully share your concerns about this conference. But speaking about the role of the European Parliament in this context, I'm not confident that the European Parliament can have a real positive role in this. First of all, I think we have to realize that this is a UN conference. So that means that member states, we are talking about member states' competence, in my opinion. And the EU has a status, but the EU has only, let's say, an observer status. It's an observer party and has no formal say in this conference. I do realize that colleagues in the European Parliament, different colleagues in the European Parliament, are in favor of a more active role of the European Parliament in the UN. But that's not the direction I want to go, to be honest. So from a constitutional point of view, I am reluctant with a too active role of the European Parliament in this. Despite that, I do have indeed the same concerns about the Durban Conference and its anti-Israel and anti-Semitic sentiments. But also, let's say, given the current political spectrum in the European Parliament, I fear that the EP would rather be supportive of the Durban Conference than critical. So that makes it also, that's one of the reasons that I'm now doubting whether I would like to put it on the agenda in the European Parliament. Maybe we can reach the opposite as what we would like to reach.
Well, perhaps you could be diplomatic and say that on the condition that they make the right resolution, you would be in favor, but you doubt that this will. Yeah. Let me also say that Bert-Jaan Ruissen represents the ECR group, which is the European Conservatives and Reformist group, and Nicola is a member of Renew Europe. And we always like to have this spectrum in the webinars, which is also reflected, of course, in what role you would want the European Parliament to play. But with just a few minutes left, Vice President Beer, what do you think Germany will do, and what can and what should the European Parliament do?
Yes, thank you. I think this is really an important case because it's once again a part of this huge field of covered or camouflaged anti-Semitism. And we have really to detect this and make it clear and speak it out. So I was quite happy that Germany didn't support the resolution draft, which is there. So there is a certain hope that those points, especially anti-Semitic points, are made in another way. But we have to see that. And at the end, my wish to German government would be also to step out of this conference, as we did it, for example, when Guido Westerwelle, so my party colleague from former times, was Minister of Foreign Affairs, because he clearly emphasized that there cannot be a conference against racism if there are in the resolution text drafts anti-Semitic parts of it. And if we cannot change this, then for me, it's necessary to step out of this conference. This would be my wish, not only towards German government, but also towards the other European member state governments, to make it clear. And so I was really happy when I heard about Gilad Erdan planning to hold an alternative conference dealing with these issues, to show that it is possible without constantly undermining the state of Israel and Jewish communities. This would be really a good project to support. And what the European Parliament can do, I mean, this is having a resolution on that, because, I mean, we have here also a bigger picture of the hostile behavior of Arab states and them voting against Israel at the UN. I'm constantly working on that, also criticizing when Germany, for example, by abstaining, is helping to get those positions from others through. And so we should see, together with colleagues from the other political group, if possibly we can help by a resolution of European Parliament.
Thank you so much, Vice President. Let me say I'm so much more encouraged after this half an hour listening to the two of you. And please know that there are many who are watching from outside of Europe, from the United States and North America and even Israel. And I think this is also encouraging for you viewers to see that there are good people in Europe fighting for your cause, for our cause, I should say, in the European Parliament. Often from a diverse ideological backgrounds, representing different party political traditions, but still fighting this battle together with us. So we are very much grateful to you, Vice President, for having taken the time, and to you, MEP Ruissen, for joining us again. And we wish both of you a well-deserved and long summer holiday after a very challenging pandemic year. So thank you to both of you. Thank you to the viewers, and we will be back again next month with a new episode of the European Report. Thank you. Shalom.
Thank you. Shalom.
Thank you. Bye. Shalom.
Bye.